Hi, welcome to our town Stettler's History Clips. This is the second video of the series. Today we're going to be looking at the Stettler Independent. The Stettler Independent's been in Stettler pretty much since the beginning. It was founded in 1906 by Will Godson from Australia. Now when Godson had first built it, he had assumed that the town's business would be heading westward, so he built over on Taylor Street, which is 51st Street now, and just north of Prospect Avenue, which is 49th Ave. Sadly, this was not the case back at that time, so the Independent's offices were a little isolated. Now in the early days, the equipment was fairly fickle and it was a hard job. It took 6 people, often women, to set each individual character. The paper at the time printed 800 impressions an hour, roughly 2-page editions. After about 2 years, Mr. Godson wanted to go back to Australia and he started advertising to sell the paper. It was at this time that Charles L. Willis, who was a teacher in Ontario at the time, saw the ads and decided to move to Stettler. Willis took over in June 15th of 1908, and the Willis name would pretty much be synonymous with the newspaper from then until the resignation of Alan Willis in 1997. On October 13th of 1908, a fire would devastate most of the downtown core. After the fire, Willis purchased a lot of what used to be the Grand Union Hotel, which put him actually on Alberta Avenue. Regardless of the fire, there were no actual issues missed. They went out on time. In 1952, on October 3rd, 1952, flames were spotted coming from the outside of the Stettler garage. Above the garage was Gordon Glebe and his daughter Vera. Vera escaped the fire. However, her father was killed in the fire. The fire continued to spread into the offices of the Independent. The people living in the above building managed to crawl through the windows and escape down back stairs. The fire was extinguished around 5 a.m. The heat was so intense that it cracked windows across the street. Following the fire of 52, upgrades to the Independent's printing center included an engraver so that pictures could be put into the issues. Charles Willis, who had purchased the paper from Godson, continued to write editorials right up until his death on May 10th, 1956, at which time his son Roy Willis became the editor and publisher. Roy had been with the paper part-time with school since about 1930. A massive upgrade took place in 1972 with the purchase of keyboards and computers. This would keep the Independent rather up to date and keep it fairly competitive for rural newspapers. In July of 1976, Roy sold his interest in the newspaper to his son Alan Willis and Bob Willis, both of whom had been in the paper as their father had been before. Roy did stay on under the title of Old Editor and was in charge of the editorial section. In 1979, the system was again retooled, giving the weekly paper a capacity of a small daily paper. This was at the cost of roughly $85,000. In 1991, the Independent would be sold to Trinity Holdings. After 80 years, it then left the family's holdings. It would be purchased again in 1997 by Black Press. In March of 2000, the Stettler Independent would finally find a home on Main Street where it sits to this day.